Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I am Tyler Osby.
And today we're talking about a game that I have never played and know nothing about, and I'm super excited to learn. Tyler?
Oh, yeah. Today we're going to talk about Splinter Cell, which is a series that is, like, I want to say near and dear to my heart for a long time because I definitely knew about these games for a while. I didn't really play them until only a couple of years ago when I played through the first four, like kind of just all in a row and had a lot of fun. But I still feel sort of a weird nostalgia for them because they're so synonymous with like Xbox back in the day, even though they were never really an exclusive to the Xbox, except for maybe the first one for like a little while. So yeah, it's just a weird nostalgia that I have for these games that I didn't play back in the day. But so we've done Metal Gear Solid already, which is one of my favorite stealth series. But I don't like those games for the stealth, especially the first three games. The stealth is like clunky, and it's the game itself is just not that great for at least the first three games. Those ones are carried very heavily by the story, which I love. Metal Gear Solid 4 and then especially 5 do a way better job of stealth stuff. Those games are actually really great stealth games. But the first three games in Metal Gear Solid, story over gameplay. But around the time that Metal Gear Solid 2 came out, a challenger approached, one which also looked like it had a good story, but it also redefined stealth gameplay in a way that was made popular by Metal Gear Solid. So this is in like 2001, 2002-ish. We're at the start of a brand new console generation, and players were looking for games that would really show off their next-gen hardware. Metal Gear Solid 2 was cool and all, but its gameplay was really just evolutionary over Metal Gear Solid 1. And while I love Metal Gear Solid 2, and y'all know this, and I do, the gameplay is still good. Like, I guess I sort of talked about earlier, like how they're bad. They're not bad. It just, that's not why I love them. But when it comes to gameplay and stealth, I got to give it over to Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. So the first Splinter Cell game dropped in 2002, and it was really, really cool. I remember how it like portrayed itself as this like super edgy game. Like, you play as Sam Fisher. He's a government operative in a black ops group called Third Echelon, which is like a government organization that doesn't exist on paper, of course. And if he gets caught, the government will disavow all knowledge if he gets caught. So he's on his own. He's a lone wolf. He's a Splinter Cell. And that's a term that I don't think is a real military term. I think that's just was created for this game.
Really? I didn't know that at all. I thought it, I mean, again, the only thing I remember about this game is like him like in all black, and then like he flips on his night vision, and then the whole like screen goes into night vision, and that's my extent of the knowledge of this first Splinter Cell game.
Yeah, and it had this cool like green and black aesthetic that matched with the Xbox too, so it like feels like an Xbox game. Like remember like old Xbox game cases were like they were, well, I mean they still are, but they were this like that like green, like the same green color as like a Mountain Dew slushie from 7-Eleven.
Oh yeah.
The original Xbox games, and so like the Splinter Cell aesthetic just like fit with the game and the overall Xbox aesthetic, which was really fun. So it just felt like an Xbox game, but it also prided itself on being really realistic, even if the organization being portrayed was fictional. They got Tom Clancy to put his name on it, who, if you're not familiar with Tom Clancy, he's famous for writing all kinds of American military fiction novels. There were a few series of games that he didn't actually write, and novels too, I think, but kind of later on, and probably still happen even though he's been dead for like a decade. But he put his own brand on it. So like if something military was associated with Tom Clancy, especially at that point in time, it was generally considered to be like realistic and high quality, and not necessarily realistic in the sense that like it portrayed real government things, but like
historical
the
fiction
Division is like
like
historical fiction, or even something like the Division where it's like it takes place in the future. And so there's like futuristic stuff, but it's also like
grounded
in
realism.
Yeah. It's like the difference between high fantasy and low fantasy, you know? Mm-hmm. Where there's like high fantasy has a lot of magic and stuff, and low fantasy doesn't. It just has.
I just like that middle fantasy. You know, give me some magic.
Yeah, like Game of Thrones has some magic.
Some magic. Not too much,
and even
though.
then, you're not really sure, except for the smoke monster stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, it was spooky smoke monster.
Yeah. So let's talk about the first Splinter Cell. And before we get into it, let's get into the Grime facts, or the Grim facts, because one of the characters named Grim in Splinter Cell. So the developer of Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell was Ubisoft Montreal. And we'll see the development studio change off between games here, between Ubisoft Montreal and then Ubisoft Shanghai and Milan do like every other. So each game kind of gets 2 years in the oven, similar to like a Call of Duty, how they were. I think Call of Duty's on like a 3-year release cycle now, but they did do 2-year stuff. Came out on November 17th, 2002 for the Xbox, April of 2003 for the PS2 and GameCube, and then February of 2003 for the PC. And I think it's important to note that Splinter Cell was a little bit weird. It wasn't technically ever an Xbox exclusive, but due to the higher, well, it might have been. I think there are pressings of the game that have like only on Xbox, like that label on it. I could be wrong though, but it didn't take very long for it to be not an Xbox exclusive. But due to the higher power levels in the Xbox, the game actually had to be changed quite a bit to work well on the PS2 and GameCube, which we'll talk about for each game. We'll kind of talk about the differences because they all have differences. So it was a little bit of an de facto Xbox exclusive, like I said earlier, because of that green and black aesthetic that was so fun. So you can play it on a lot of different systems. You can play it on Xbox, you can play it on PS2 or GameCube, you can play it on PS3. Actually, the first 3 games got a remake on PS3. They're not very good remakes. You can play it on PC. But the best way to play is either PC if you're a keyboard and mouse fan, because video game controllers just don't really work with the earlier Splinter Cell games. And maybe they don't work with any of them now that I think of it. Maybe Blacklist, but I don't think Conviction has built in. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So the best way to play, especially if you like controller, is to just play the original Xbox version, but on your Xbox One or your Xbox Series X or S, because it all works. And
it's going to be so weird to have to say that from now on, that we already have another console generation.
Yeah, and the fact that the series, like the Xbox Series, plays everything the Xbox One plays. So it's like, I guess we could just say play it on your Xbox One, and if you have a Series, you know that means you can also play it on that, I guess.
By the way,
is that how you should refer to it? Is the Xbox Series? That seems silly.
Xbox Series of consoles, maybe? It seems strange. The
Xbox Series, because then there's the X and the S. Gosh, Microsoft really goofed on that.
Real weird naming conventions. Agreed.
Yeah.
I've spent my whole life thinking this game was an Xbox exclusive, by the way. So you're kind of blowing my mind that it came out on PS2 and GameCube. The original.
Yeah.
Splinter Cell.
Yeah, and they marketed it kind of as if it were an Xbox exclusive too, I remember.
And people talk about it like it's an Xbox exclusive.
Yeah, and it really wasn't exclusive for that long. It was, so it came out on PC in February, so like 2 months after, or 3 months after it came out on Xbox, and then, so it was like 5 months later that it came out on PS2 and GameCube. So like, it was exclusive for a little while, but not that long.
Yeah.
But the PS2 and GameCube versions of the game, like, just don't play them. They're just not as good. We'll talk about it.
You heard it here first, folks. There's a very lukewarm take. Don't play.
Yeah, lukewarm take. It's just unless like, well, I guess we'll get to it. The game sold 27 million copies according to Google, so it did pretty well. It's really hard to find number of copies sold for most games.
It really is.
Especially even in the Splinter Cell series.
Yeah, they don't share that data. Like, it usually is like for the fiscal year it comes out, they share it, and then they stop caring. Because at that point, it's in the used market. They can't track it easily. Yeah,
like, and they don't care. Yeah, and it's like 10 years later, we're not getting how many copies sold of the original Splinter Cell. Like, no one cares.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it's safe to say, like, unless a company reprints, which a lot of them don't, then, like, especially like with Nintendo games, I feel like you can say, okay, how many copies of this game did they print for the Switch? Or like physical, I mean, let's say pre-digital downloads. So how many copies of the 64 game did they print? That's how many copies were sold, because those always sold out, but
yeah. But then even how do you find that number out, right?
Yeah, because they probably don't have to keep track of that stuff. Or Nintendo does, they just never release it because they want to not tell people they're like intentionally not printing as many copies of games, which they've definitely done in the past. Like, so
they've done that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Splinter Cell won a number of awards. E3 2002 Game Critics Award for Best Action Adventure Game, the Game Developers Choice Awards, Excellence in Writing, which is strange. I mean, the game's story is fine, but it's not, I don't know if I'd call it a great exercise in fiction. It got the Interactive Achievement Awards, Console Game of the Year, and Outstanding Achievement in Gameplay Engineering. And then IGN's Best of 2002, it was Xbox Game of the Year and Xbox Best Graphics.
Which is funny because I remember it having this like film grain kind of look to it when you have the night vision on. Is that my memory messing up, or is that what it looked like?
No, it kind of does. Yeah, it kind of does. The graphics are really cool because I remember it was one of the first games that did where you would like walk in front of a light and it will project like your shadow behind you. Like the clip that they always showed in the trailers and like the commercials for the game was him like sneaking by like a vent, and all of the like the little like slits in the vent would like show up on him as he sneaks through the light, which like isn't that impressive now, but was like so cool back in the day of like, whoa, the lighting in this game's so good. So average time to complete, 12 and a half hours for the first game, which is pretty standard for all of them. They all take between like 11 and 13 hours to beat, which is not too bad. And it got a 93 on Metacritic, 93 out of 100 for Xbox, 89 out of 100 for PS2 and GameCube. So those are the grim facts, the grime facts.
The grime facts, the grime tax. We're paying the grime tax for the grime facts.
The grime tax or the grime facts. So let's talk about the development of Splinter Cell. So originally the game was to be a sci-fi game called The Drift, designed to kill Metal Gear Solid 2. Like they were literally given the directive like, hey, you need to be better than Metal Gear Solid 2.
Side tangent. Has any game that's been called a game killer actually been successful?
Never, not even once. And that's a great question. If you know of a game that has succeeded in being the killer and it was like sort of advertised as that, I would love to hear that, because I remember like Killzone, and that game came out, I was like, this is the Halo killer. For a long time this is the Halo killer. It's like Killzone,
Anthem, oh my gosh,
Anthem, the Destiny killer
drove me nuts. When I was like sitting there like, this game is very different and it doesn't look good, and it came out and guess what, it wasn't very good.
Yeah. So originally it was a sci-fi game called The Drift. They pivoted to Splinter Cell, though, after the gameplay systems in The Drift just ended up not being very much fun. They'd made like this sort of bad third-person shooter in a world that didn't feel great. So first they thought maybe they could make it this cool, like gadget-centric James Bond title. But after Ubisoft acquired Red Storm Entertainment, the studio that had made the successful Rainbow Six games, which were based on an actual Tom Clancy novel, they got the license to make Tom Clancy games. So they reworked Drift with the gadgets that they were going to do for the James Bond version, but they added a bunch of other Tom Clancy stuff in instead. So one big core thing they did with the original Splinter Cell was base the stealth on lighting. And this was important because of the increased capabilities in lighting that that generation had over the previous generation. Like that's like the biggest difference, I think, when you look at like a PlayStation 1 game or an N64 game, and then you look at a PlayStation 2 or a GameCube game, it's the lighting that is like really dynamic and cool.
Well, we kind of talked about it with the id Software episodes too. Like lighting was the next big thing in 3D graphics. So this is like kind of lining up.
And that's why Daikatana pivoted from the Quake engine to the Quake 2 engine so late in its like development, was because they wanted this enhanced lighting that the Quake 2 engine had. So that was like all the rage in the late 90s, early 2000s. But what Splinter Cell did was use this to their advantage, and they made their stealth game all about sneaking around in the shadows. So, as Sam Fisher, you sneak through the shadows, like avoiding conflicts and using your gadgets to infiltrate buildings and make your way to the end of the level. What they did with the lighting thing was they actually there's like a light meter that is on Sam that like will kind of show how visible he is, basically, so you always know generally if you're going to be able to sneak by or something, which is not really something that Metal Gear Solid did. You didn't use the lighting to your advantage in that game to quite the extent that you did in Splinter Cell. But the rest of the gameplay is like really fun, third-person stealth. You have different sets of goggles for seeing in the dark. Those 3 green dots of his like night vision goggles are like the iconic Splinter Cell sort of.
That commercial was so like hype achieved with those 3 dots.
Yeah, and I want to say, so he had like a night vision thing, but also like thermal goggles, and maybe one other thing. And I want to say that at the time, and this may not be true anymore, but at the time, goggles that did both thermal vision and night vision like just could not exist in the same thing, like without being enormous, I guess, or something. Like there was like, and I could be wrong about this, I don't know where I'm getting this from, but there were a lot of people who were like, I remember realism people being like, you can't have goggles that do both of those things. And like, they were like, but we have 3 green dots, so that's why we can do it. And you're like, okay, I guess it's fine. It's a video game.
Yeah. I mean, it's a video game. It's Tom Clancy. Like, I think, doesn't he do like that Jack Ryan show and all those other ones too? Yeah. It's all Tom Clancy branded. So yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's fine. It's whatever. It's a video game. So you're given a bunch of gadgets, and then you're encouraged to try to play through the level without getting spotted or without having to kill anyone, which I'm pretty sure it's possible to do in all of the games. It's just really, really difficult, something that only the stealth masters can do. and I was not able to do it because I'm not good at video games.
I like games that like I don't think there's truly other than Metal Gear stealth games anymore. Really, that are, I guess there's indies, but no big AAA stealth titles except for Metal Gear.
There are a lot of games that will have like stealth elements. Like I remember Spider-Man had some stealth sections. But yeah, you're right. There are no like buy this game because it's a stealth game. We need a new Splinter Cell. That's what we need.
Yeah, I mean it's been in the rumor mill for about 2 years, so I wouldn't be surprised if we got an announcement soon.
I know, and they keep putting Sam Fisher into things. Like they put him into Ghost Recon, the newer Ghost Recon games, and he's in some other Ubisoft stuff. But anyway, so let's talk about the story of the first Splinter Cell. It goes like this. The president of Georgia, the country, not the U.S. state, has been assassinated. It's the far-off future of 2004, and Sam Fisher...
It's perfect.
Sam Fisher, who is voiced by the legendary Michael Ironside, perhaps most famous in my mind for being the bad guy in The Next Karate Kid, the one with Hilary Swank. He's the main bad guy. He's like the crease of that movie. Anyway, Sam Fisher is a former U.S. Navy SEAL and Gulf War veteran, and he's set in to figure out exactly what's going on here because the president of Georgia just got assassinated. At this point, I've played this game several times. I looked it up on Wikipedia. I don't know what is happening in this game. It's so detailed. And not in a like this storyline makes no sense and it is incomprehensible, like they are bad at writing. It's just so like there's such like political intrigue involved in like there's like a ton of characters that I just have no frame of reference for who these people are and what they do. So like you say, the president of Georgia, like I don't even really know what that means, right? Like I guess I know what a president of a country is, and I know that this person is very important. But so it's like you're never quite sure who's good and who's bad, but not in like the fun way where like things are ambiguous and like some people are good and bad. But it's just that like all of these characters are so forgettable that I don't know who Sam is talking to half the time.
I picture the writers like pitching this game and it being that gif of Charlie Day from Always Sunny in Philadelphia with like all the like yarn and the pins behind him.
That's it. Yeah, that's what it is. And I think it's like standard Tom Clancy stuff. Like if you care about all of those things, then maybe it makes sense to you. And maybe I'm just like uncultured swine who just doesn't understand storylines like this. But there are like some twists and turns, and Sam barely manages to avoid a world war or something probably. And then after the credits, he gets a call for another job. Woo! That's Splinter Cell. If you like it, if you can break down the story, I would love to hear that.
We get like a 3-page email next week.
Yeah, I read it on Wikipedia and I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me.
There's got to be a YouTube explained video about it. There has to be someone breaking it down.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Oh, I should look that up and watch something like that.
You know what? Just look that up. We're not going to hear it. This isn't Plot Decks, the history of plots. Okay.
Yeah.
Just look it up on YouTube and you'll figure it out. We're going to do the same thing because we're both confused.
Yeah. That's the most in-depth I'll go on the plot of a Splinter Cell game because they all are varying levels of that. But something I think is interesting about this game in particular and the rest of the Splinter Cell series is the differences between console versions. So in this generation, there's a pretty big disparity in power between the Xbox and the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube, which meant that most games were just technically better on the Xbox. They had better lighting, better frame rate. It had a hard drive, so load times could be sped up, but with caching and stuff. But for Splinter Cell, the lighting was one of the most important gameplay aspects. Like the lighting mattered. It wasn't just a pretty thing that you looked at. Like it mattered. It helped you play the game better because you had to sneak around in it based on how well lit the areas were. So porting the game to PS2 and GameCube, they had to take great care to dial the quality back while not ruining that core aspect of the gameplay. So the success of Splinter Cell meant that they couldn't cut corners either. They couldn't just they knew this game was going to sell when they put it out on PS2 and GameCube, so they couldn't just release garbage, just like put out a crappy port that people forgot about because Splinter Cell was so popular and they knew they were a franchise at this point and they wanted to set themselves up for, selling more games in the future. So many of the maps had to be made smaller or split up into chunks on the other console ports, mostly because there just wasn't enough system memory to keep it all in. The PS2 had 32 megs of RAM, with the GameCube only having 24 megs of RAM, but the Xbox had 64 megs of RAM, which was over double what even the PS2 had. So what worked on the Xbox was going to be pretty tight squeeze on these other consoles, so they had to make the levels smaller. Ultimately, they were able to make it work. The PS2 and GameCube versions are a little different. They're overall easier. Some of the AI is a little bit simpler too, but they work, and the graphics hold up okay. They're not as good as the Xbox version. They're still pretty good, and the lighting system is more or less intact, most importantly, which was something that the company was very proud of, that they were able to do. Like, they were able to really make some breakthroughs on the PS2 and GameCube for the lighting systems. So I think back in the day, like, if you just had a PS2, this would have been a fine way to play Splinter Cell. But if you're trying to play Splinter Cell nowadays, there's just way better ways to do it. You have access to, I'm assuming you have more than access to, if you're asking what is the best way to play this game, I'm assuming you have access to multiple versions of it somehow, right?
I'm also guessing that finding a used copy of this game on Xbox and just playing it on your newer Xbox system, whatever it is, whatever series or letter it is not that hard to do nowadays.
Yeah, super easy. It's like probably under $10. They sold a lot of copies of this game. Yeah. So, and each console version of this game also had its own exclusives. So that's one of the caveats here, is there is like, maybe you want to play the PS2 version for the things that the PS2 version got. So like the Xbox and the PC version, had free DLC, which was, I really feel like was one of the first instances of like console DLC, because I remember you had to connect to Xbox Live and you could download it. It was free. They didn't have any way to charge you for it. Like, they just didn't have the system set up to do that. So it was all free. And this was a single player game after all. And in those days, Xbox games were not required to connect to Xbox Live for things like messaging or friends lists. A few single-player only games would connect so that you could like see your friends online, but like most games just didn't, if they didn't have an online multiplayer component. The PS2 version got its own exclusive level, which was a nuclear power plant. It got some new cutscenes and a new intro cinematic, so that's neat. The GameCube version had all the cinematics, like the upgraded cinematics of the PS2, but also included the option to link a Game Boy Advance to give yourself a map of the level you were on. And it had sticky bombs. That's neat. And 480p support, which I'm kind of surprised the original Xbox version doesn't have progressive scan support.
Wow.
I'm always surprised when I see an Xbox game that doesn't have that. That seems like a no-brainer, but I guess it was 2001. Who had a progressive scan TV in 2001?
I also don't think people were throwing around the terms like 480p or anything like that in 2001. If you're like a console gamer, you were probably only really thinking about that if you were playing on PC, you know?
Yeah, and and around this time, people were hearing rumblings of like HD's coming, but there weren't really many TVs that actually did HD. I remember ED TVs, enhanced definition TVs, which I think were TVs that did 480p. But you had to hook your things up with different hookups. So if you didn't have those, you were kind of out of luck, and it just wasn't a thing. You're right. It just wasn't a thing console gamers were thinking about. So maybe it doesn't really matter that much, but it still surprised me.
No, it matters to this history podcast for sure.
That's right. I think the best way to play this game is almost certainly on PC, even though it is pretty old and it might have some trouble running. If you have trouble and don't want to mess with it, though, the OG Splinter Cell on Xbox One works really well too. So that's the way to play the game. That's the first Splinter Cell, but there was room for improvement, much more room for improvement, in fact, and we would get that with Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow.
Really cool name.
Not Splinter Cell 2. Yeah, very cool name. They never numbered their games. They just gave them different subtitles, which is
I like that.
Kind of different. Me too. So the second game was Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, and this was a little over a year later in March 2004. So this time, the Xbox, PC, and Game Boy Advance versions all launched at the same time. I should have said this at the top. I'm really only covering like the main game here. Like, I'm not going to cover that the game came out on like Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance or all of them.
That's okay.
Like,
I mean,
yeah, there's like N-Gage versions and stuff too. Like, I'm just talking about like the core game.
I also feel like a majority of these games in this time period got GBA ports, and they were just not great. If they're great, we'll talk about them, but most of the time they're not good.
Yeah. So anyway, the Xbox, PC, and GBA versions all launched at the same time. Then the PS2 and GameCube versions followed that summer. Once again, Xbox is the way to play here. And I think that remains so today because, interestingly, Pandora Tomorrow isn't available anywhere online for PC. It did come out on PC back in the day, but you can't buy it on Steam or Uplay or anywhere like that. You can buy Splinter Cell, you can buy Chaos Theory, but you can't buy Pandora Tomorrow. So I think there are some technical issues that they were never able to address on modern PCs. So if you have a disc version, you can get it working on your computer with some hacks, but it's like not great because I think it's because they upgraded the lighting system and they used things that the GeForce 3, GeForce 4, and GeForce FX graphics cards were like exclusive features of those graphics cards, that maybe this was like the only game to use it or something, because like later on graphics cards didn't support those features, and so it just doesn't work right on modern graphics cards, so they just don't sell it, which is kind of crazy to me.
That is weird.
They didn't fix that, but I don't know.
Hey, get a disc, get a disc.
Yeah, grab a disc, pop it in your Xbox One, go to town. You're gonna be fine. And all of these games I think are available on the Xbox store too for like $10 each, so you can just download them too.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we're still technically in like, it's gonna be Cyber Monday when this comes out. Who knows what they'll be priced? When the disc comes out, it could be really cheap.
Could go nuts. Yeah, you could buy the whole thing for the whole series for $10, and it would be well worth it. So let's do the Pandora Tomorrow grind packs. Like I said earlier, Ubisoft Shanghai and Ubisoft Milan worked on this because Ubisoft Montreal was hard at work on the next game, which would be Chaos Theory. It came out in March 2004 for the Xbox, June and July of 2004 for PS2 and GameCube, and then it came out at the same time as it came out on Xbox for the PC in March. So, so it was Xbox, PS2, GameCube, PC, and like I said before, best way to play it on your Xbox One. Just pop that disc in, you're going to be fine. It's hard to find number of copies sold for Pandora Tomorrow, actually. Like, they're just, like, you just can't really find it. I think it did okay, I guess.
Let's make up a number. A bajillion.
Yeah, it sold a bajillion, and it didn't seem to win any formal awards. I didn't dig too deeply here. Maybe there's something that it won, but I didn't.
Certainly not the excellence in writing.
Yeah, not the same as the original Splinter Cell, although the storyline is a little bit easier to follow.
So maybe it deserved the excellence in writing.
Maybe, yeah. This one's also 10 to 12 hours, depending on how completionist you get. It scored a 93 out of 100 for Xbox, an 87 out of 100 for PS2, and a 78 for GameCube. So it's significantly worse on the GameCube, and we'll dig into that a little bit, I think.
Isn't it the exact same score it got for the first one? Was a 93 out of 100 on Xbox?
Scrolling up.
Yeah, it is. Oh,
it
wow.
is, yeah. Okay, so game didn't get worse. That's good.
Just as good.
Yeah, and I think the general consensus was that Pandora Tomorrow they just took everything of the first Splinter Cell and just made it better. So it should probably even be higher than 93. But so with Pandora Tomorrow, we start getting into the almost yearly release cycle that was starting to become common with larger, big published games in the 2000s, like Call of Duty, which is still a yearly release schedule to this day. Assassin's Creed, also made by Ubisoft, would eventually become like a yearly released franchise. And in 2004, Ubisoft was really trying to be Activision and make money by releasing games every year. And usually this meant that games were very similar year over year, like sports games. And Pandora Tomorrow is not an exception to this rule. But it was a straight up improvement over the original Splinter Cell in almost every way, even if it wasn't like a revolutionary game to change the whole franchise. It just was better in everything that it did. It also helped this one was developed by two different studios at Ubisoft, with Montreal getting to take now an extra year to work on the third Splinter Cell game, which we will also talk about today. So Pandora Tomorrow, very similar to the first Splinter Cell, so I'll just go over a few of the differences here. The story takes place mostly in Indonesia, with Sam Fisher being tasked with stopping a catastrophic plot led by a man named Sudahi Sadono, leader of a militia that's vying for power in East Timor. Timor, is that how you say that country?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure. I think Timor. Yeah. Let's go with it.
Sure. So Sedano's plot involves several bombs all around the United States. Every 24 hours, Sedano makes a phone call that keeps the bombs from exploding and releasing a deadly disease. The plan is called Pandora Tomorrow, hence the name of the game. So anyway, the idea there is if he's captured or killed and can't end up making that phone call, Pandora Tomorrow executes and smallpox goes everywhere, and that's really, really bad. So there's a few twists and turns. It's all very exciting. And there's a little more action, and it's clearer, I think, what the actual conflict is in Pandora Tomorrow compared to the first game, which was like a little heavy on the fake international politics for me. Yeah, like I said, I don't have a problem with political plots. I just found the first game very hard to follow because just no frame of reference. But Pandora Tomorrow is a little bit easier to follow. Gameplay-wise, it's still basically the same game as the first game. There are a few additional moves, like being able to shoot when hanging upside down or being able to spin past a doorway to avoid being detected, which looks really cool. But it's largely the same. If you like the first game, the second one is a little bit more streamlined, has a few extra options for you to tackle each level, which I remember the levels feeling a little bit more open in the second game than in the first game. It's not an open world game, but I think the object is like, it's still to make it to the end of the level, but it takes place in more outdoor areas. So at least offers the illusion of being bigger and offering more options. But I don't, now that I think about it, like I don't actually know if it was more open or not. It just felt a little bit more open because it was more outdoor.
An illusion.
Yeah. So as with the first game, there are some major differences between the Xbox version and the PS2/GameCube versions. The lighting is, of course, degraded in the PS2 GameCube versions. The load times are longer, and the levels are shortened. But overall, the quality of the ports is better than the ports of the first game, though, since they were given a lot more development time to port the game than the 4 months they got for the first game. So it's a little bit better. Still, best way to play is on an Xbox. The PC version, well, I guess I already talked about the PC version and how they did some weird stuff for the graphics on that, and so it just doesn't work on PCs anymore.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
That's a real bummer.
Yeah.
And surprising that Ubisoft hasn't like made it work, because that's something they could capitalize on, I feel like, as far as money goes. People would buy this game on PC.
Yeah. I'd buy it just to complete my Splinter Cell collection on PC.
Or do you have all of them on PC?
I have all of the ones that are available on PC.
Oh. Is the second one the only one that's not on there?
Yeah, it's the only one I don't have.
Wow.
I guess I could buy a disc of it online, but I wouldn't be able to play it.
But it wouldn't sit in your Steam library all nice either.
That's right.
That's
right.
a bummer.
Yeah. But I've also got a shelf full of the Xbox versions of all these games too, so my Splinter Cell collection is still complete.
Very much complete. Nice.
Yeah. I actually don't have Blacklist for 360, so maybe it's not complete. But anyway, Pandora Tomorrow also included, for the first time in a Splinter Cell game, it had multiplayer, which is pretty cool. They had a PvP mode called Spies versus Mercs, where the spies would sneak around trying to outwit the mercs who had big guns and were trying to stop the spies. If you were playing as a mercenary, it was a first-person shooter. If you're playing as a spy, you were playing as a third-person sneak 'em up. Sneak 'em up? Is that a genre?
Yeah, sneak 'em up is very much the new genre of all the games that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so there are a few game modes. They're all basically the same. Be a spy, do the objective. If you're a mercenary, stop the spies from doing the objective. It was 2 versus 2, and it had an online component on Xbox. And it seems really fun. I think if we could figure out a good way to do it, it'd be fun to play for like an hour, I think, just to
oh,
see
yeah, I'd be down to play
with
some
Spies
sneak 'em
versus
ups.
Mercs.
I'm into it.
Play some sneak 'em ups. So that's Pandora Tomorrow. We'll move on to the next game in the series, which is, I think, the most critically acclaimed game in the series, which is Splinter Cell Chaos Theory.
Another cool name.
Yeah. Grime Facts, developed by Ubisoft Montreal, released in March 2005 on most platforms, all at the same time. Came out in March 2011 for 3DS, which I didn't know that Chaos Theory got a 3DS port.
What?
In like 8 years later.
I mean, it could be good, because by that time they might have been able to fit the whole game on the 3DS. And if they did, then it would be a good port, right?
Yeah, probably. And it also came out in September 2011 on the PS3. It was the last in the Splinter Cell trilogy remake that only came out on PS3 for some reason, which was strange. And that's actually that remake is how I played Pandora Tomorrow when I played through it a couple years ago. I played the PS3 version, and it was rough. It was like
buggy,
low frame rate.
Or?
It wasn't buggy. It just was really slow. Like the frame rate was just bad. It was like, felt like it was running at 20 frames per second the whole time.
That's a bummer.
It may, I think hopefully it runs better on Xbox One. I assume it does if you play the original version. But yeah, I think that's interesting that it came out on 3DS. The PC version still has no controller support for Chaos Theory. Back to Chaos Theory.
Can you play it as like a keyboard and mouse, though? Is that a problem? Because you did that, right?
Yeah. Well, the way I played Chaos Theory was I played it with a Steam controller, and I had the Steam controller set to basically emulate a keyboard and mouse. And that worked pretty well. I really like the Steam controller, especially for games that are not designed for controllers.
You're the only person I know that has used a Steam controller the way it was meant to be used and made it successful. And I'm proud of you for that, because I don't think I've known anyone that's done that. That's smart to use that in this situation.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite controllers. Like I was really sad when they discontinued it and they were selling them for like $5. I just bought an extra one. I was like, well, when mine dies, then I'll have another one ready to go. I don't use it a lot, but I do like it, especially for playing shooters with the gyroscope. But anyway, back to Chaos Theory. It had sold 2.5 million copies by the end of March 2005. And I don't think it has any formal awards either. It must have won some sort of Xbox Game of the Year awards, though, because this game had a lot of people who loved it. Like, it got really good reviews. 94 out of 100 for Xbox, 89 for PS2, 81 for GameCube. So, like, raising the bar across the board here. Maybe there was something else that came out in 2005 that just blew everything else away that was everybody's favorite game, but
wasn't Sneak 'em Up though. Not a Sneak 'em Up game for sure.
Not in 2005, no. So yeah, after a 2-year development cycle, Ubisoft launched Chaos Theory on Xbox, PS2, PC, and GameCube, and they were all within a few days of each other, which was unusual because Splinter Cell 1 and Pandora Tomorrow took a few months to hit the lesser consoles, the PS2 and
you
GameCube.
Heard it here first, folks. Tyler called them lesser consoles. Whoa.
Yeah, well, when it comes to Splinter Cell, they are the lesser consoles, and I don't think that is arguable.
Hot takes. Gonna get emails in letters and faxes.
Yeah, yep, can't wait. So the 2-year development cycle really showed for Chaos Theory. It allowed Ubisoft to move the game over to Unreal Engine 2.5, which was a pretty large improvement over the Unreal Engine 2 that the first 2 games ran on. And I don't know for certain, but I think 2.5 seemed to have a lot more options for lighting. That was one of the big things that got upgraded for Chaos Theory was their lighting system. And fun fact, the first BioShock game runs on Unreal Engine 2.5 and looks way better than most Unreal Engine 2 games.
Man, that's a game that I need to go revisit again, the BioShock trilogy. And it's one that I've been thinking about doing on this podcast for a really long time. If people want us to do BioShock, they should email us because it's one of those ones that I've been flirting with. And I love BioShock so much.
Me too. I say do it. You don't need anybody else's approval.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really trying to get through Zelda. I want to complete it.
Yeah.
I want to put a cap on it and be like, we're done with it for a little while. And I'm getting close. I'm getting very close. So we're probably gonna have a Zelda episode next week just to finish this out. So
sweet. I'm excited for it. Chaos Theory also was the first Splinter Cell game to use ragdoll physics too, which were starting to become all the rage at this point in time, 2005. I remember Unreal Tournament 2004 was like the first game with ragdoll physics that I was like, whoa, this is so cool.
Love it.
So they had added it to
always
Chaos
funny.
Theory. Yeah. Chaos Theory kept the same stealth style of the earlier games where lighting was super important, but they also added an audio component where Sam needed to be quiet. So there's like beyond the light meter, you also had like an audio meter of how loud you were. So if you're walking on certain like surfaces, you'll make more noise. If you're moving faster, you'll make more noise, that kind of stuff. The first games had something kind of like this where it was like generally better for Sam to walk than run. But Chaos Theory made it like a full-blown system. And you also can't fail a level by raising the alarm level too high. In the first 2 games, if you get caught by someone, they'll like tell their buddies and then the alarm level goes up and then you can kind of try to fight your way out still. But after a while, the alarm level goes up to so high it just says you fail. You got to try again. But in Chaos Theory, you can't fail that way. The game just gets harder and harder, and it's more likely that you're going to have to kill enemies to progress. I like it. It was a nice addition because ending the game kind of abruptly just for getting caught can be annoying in the first 2 games. But realistically, once the alarm level gets that high in Chaos Theory, it's pretty tough to get it to come back down to normal levels. Like you might as well just reload. But still, I think it's nice to have the choice. And if you want to just like kill everyone, I guess you can do that. You know,
it's also
changes the game.
It seems also cool because it's like if you play it again, you can like play it differently each time. Like your strategy can change, which I like.
Yep. Yeah. Which another thing they added to Chaos Theory was loadouts for the level. So you can choose like from like 3 or 4 different loadouts, I think, before every level. So if you want more stealth focused stuff, you can take the stealth loadout with all the cool gadgets, but not as many guns, or you can take the bigger guns that don't have as much gadgets. And then there was like usually a middle of the road package that kind of gave you some gadgets, but also some guns. I usually did that one because I would try to sneak as best I could until I screwed up, and then I would try to shoot my way out of it. So that was always fun for me. There's a bunch of new weapons and a bunch of new attachments to go along with them. I'm not going to cover all that stuff here, but basically if you like the first 2 games, you have more options now in how you tackle each mission for Chaos Theory, which was pretty cool. Sam can also use the environment to take out enemies too, like knocking barrels off of stuff or flipping tables or whatever. So overall, everything in Chaos Theory had been elevated, and that makes it perhaps the height of the series for a lot of people. They really perfected the formula and added in just enough new stuff that it felt really, really good in Chaos Theory. Story for Chaos Theory, not as good as Pandora Tomorrow. I have no idea what happens in this game. I read the Wikipedia synopsis again, and I still don't understand it. Something to do with like China, Japan, Korea. There's some information warfare stuff going on. Lots of Tom Clancy stuff. Lots of techno babble. I'm sure we're averting a world war by the end. So if you like that stuff, you'll like it. If you don't, you can just ignore it because it doesn't matter to the gameplay. In multiplayer, they brought it back. Chaos Theory, they brought back Spies versus Mercs, and they improved it. They added a bunch of maps. They made the maps a little bit more interactive too, and they changed up the modes a bit. One of them is kind of story-based, where the spies would kind of unlock more of the map as they accomplish goals. And then the Mercs are always trying to stop them, of course. There's also Disc Hunt, where the spies just have to find discs, and then there's just straight-up deathmatch mode. So that's kind of cool. They also added a co-op mode, which is first for the series. So they had 4 levels specifically designed for co-op play. So it's not just dropping 2 Sam Fishers into the main storyline like they do in Halo, where they just like, oh, there's 2 Master Chiefs. The co-op levels have their own story and their own gameplay stuff going on. You play as different agents who are like kind of working in tandem with Sam. Like the storyline sort of follows, and you're just like agents doing something else somewhere else. But I would like to play it. I think I've heard some good things about the co-op mode, but it's kind of hard to play on Xbox Live these days on original Xbox games, so we may have to rig something up to make it work.
I'd be down though. Can we still do it? Like,
I think so. You can do it over System Link. So like anything that works over System Link, you can make it work over the internet with some computer stuff. So I think we can make it work.
I'd be down to try this out.
We might be able to play the PC version, and that might be just the easiest way to do it too.
That is what we have been doing usually when we play these co-op games.
Yeah. So once again, for the definitive version of this game is to just play the original Xbox version, although the PC version is really good. I said earlier I played it with a Steam controller because it doesn't have traditional controller support, but that worked pretty well to play it that way on my TV. But like I tend to prefer controllers for games like this because like especially you get the joystick, right, that you can slowly sneak with, and the way they do that on PC is you're playing with WASD, but the way that you speed up and slow down Sam Fisher is like you roll the mouse wheel up or down, which works well enough, but it's just not quite as intuitive as just using a controller. But you can't play the multiplayer online anymore because Xbox Live for original Xbox is shut down. But since it's all over System Link, there's ways to make that work. If you know who you want to play with and you have friends who want to play. The GameCube and PS2 versions of the game is, again, inferior, but they were at least released at the same time this time. There are big differences in the GameCube version, actually. They only offer split-screen multiplayer in co-op on the GameCube version. The PvP, like Spies versus Mercenaries mode, just doesn't exist on GameCube. IGN also notes that the co-op on PS2 and GameCube feels more like a series of puzzle rooms than a cohesive campaign, since those consoles, they always had to have the levels be smaller, same as all the other Splinter Cell games. So like the co-op really suffered from that, I think. So that's Chaos Theory, though. Lots of people think it's the height of the series because they went on to play Double Agent, but they played, well, we'll talk about Double Agent.
Man, I feel like PS2 and GameCube really just dropped the ball, you know?
Especially when it came to Splinter Cell. I would be interested in doing a more in-depth, like, this seems like something that Scott the Woz would do. You ever watch his videos on YouTube, Scott
I've
the
seen
Woz?
a couple of them, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like something he'd do where he would take, like, console differences and, like, talk about several games and their console differences and do it in a fun and engaging way. Maybe he's already done it. But, yeah, like, that was a time where the consoles power was so different that they had to make changes to how the games were based on what console they were making it for. Whereas like in the generation after, like the 360 and PS3, there were some differences, but nothing that I would say they'd made changes between games for, you know what I mean? Or especially the Xbox One and the PS4, like the game is just, when you buy a game, it's just the same. Maybe it runs a little smoother on one console over the other, but it's just the same game.
Yeah.
But in the Xbox and PS2 days, the difference was so big that they had to make changes to everything for most games, I think.
I feel bad for like developers on that side too, because they were clearly trying to do the best they could, but it's like, sorry, we can't take a bunch of stuff out because it just isn't as powerful as one console or the other, you know? So
yeah. And the Xbox had a hard drive, which was kind of a game changer in terms of like being able to store like cache things so that you could load them faster. And it had double the RAM, which is huge. Like just straight up double the RAM of the next system in line, which is just crazy to me.
Did you burn CDs onto your Xbox? Because I did.
Yes.
I burned CDs onto them, and then I would listen to those songs in Grand Theft Auto 3.
Yeah. Oh, that was so cool.
It was the best.
Yeah, you couldn't do that on PS2 or GameCube. There's just nothing. It just didn't exist.
I find it weird that you can't do it on the newer Grand Theft Auto games, as far as I know. You can't do that.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. You can't just put your own music in. Maybe on PC. I mean, I'm sure there's mods on PC that let you do whatever you want.
I wonder, can you burn a CD onto your Xbox One like you used to be able to do with the Xbox? Probably not. There's probably some weird music DRM kind of deal that is not okay.
You could do it on 360, I want to say. Yeah, you could still do that, but I don't think you could on Xbox One. I don't know if people really want to do that anymore.
Yeah, that's a thing of the past. I've gotten rid of most of my CDs over the last 5 years, so I totally get why that's not a thing anymore.
Imagine listening to CDs in 2013 when the Xbox One came out. Nope, wasn't doing it. Okay, so let's talk about the last game we're going to talk about today, because the later two games in the Splinter Cell series are a little bit too new, I think, for us to be covering on history, and we're getting a little long here. We're talking about Splinter Cell Double Agent. I feel like a lot of series end up as trilogies before moving on to the next generation of consoles, and certainly the first three Splinter Cell games kind of feel like that, like they're kind of a cohesive trilogy that feel pretty good together. But in 2006, Ubisoft released Splinter Cell Double Agent, which was a cross-generational game on both next-gen systems and the previous generation. So usually when this happens, the previous gen version is scaled down in graphics and other things, but it's mostly the same game. I think the Tony Hawk series is a pretty good example of that, where Tony Hawk 3 and 4 were solidly PS2 titles, right? But they also came out on the PS1 and N64, or at least 3 came out on the N64, 4 did not. And they were basically the same games. They had lesser graphics, smaller levels, they ran a little bit slower. Well, with Double Agent, Ubisoft gave us two almost completely different games. And one of them is better than the other. And it may not be the one you think. That's right. I'm putting clickbait in the middle of this episode.
Oh, man.
But first,
I love it. Let's keep doing this every episode.
Mid-episode clickbait.
Yeah.
Just imagine my face, like my surprised face in the YouTube thumbnail,
You know who's the worst at clickbait tangent? Is the guy, gosh, of course I say that, and I'm looking, and his face is in my mind. PC guy that does all the graphics card comparisons and stuff. The really, really big one. Canadian.
Talking about Linus Tech Tips?
I am talking about Linus Tech Tips.
Yeah.
How come I said that and I couldn't remember his name? But he is the worst with clickbait.
It's so bad. And there's an episode of we're continuing on this tangent. There's an episode of their longer podcast where they explain why they do that. They also hate doing it.
Yeah, but it's because it works.
They're like, when we do it, videos get more views. And this is a business, so we're going to keep doing it. And they're like, we hate it too.
Necessary evil.
Yep.
Clickbait.
So let's talk about the Splinter Cell Double Agent Grime Facts. It was developed by Ubisoft Montreal for the previous gen version, so the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube. Same company that did Chaos Theory and the original Splinter Cell. So keep that in mind. Ubisoft Shanghai and Ubisoft Milan did the PC version and the Xbox 360 version. I'm just going to call it the 360 version, and that's going to stand in for just next gen because it also came out on PS3.
I'm fine with that.
So it came out in October 2006 for the 360 and the previous generation of consoles. Came out in November on PC of 2006. Came out in December of 2006 for the Wii, which was the same version as the previous generation. It was not even though it was a next generation console technically at the time, the Wii, the game that came out on it was the same one they had made for the original Xbox. And then in March of 2007, it came out on PS3. So there's quite a bit of distance between Xbox and the PS3 on this one. I don't know how many copies it sold, but it did win a bunch of awards. Best Action Game of 2006 from IGN, Best Original Score of 2006 from IGN for Xbox 360. It was nominated by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences for Best Action Adventure Game, Best Male Performance, Best Sound Design, Best Original Music of 2006. It won Team Xbox's Best Action Game of the Year and Game of the Year for the Xbox version. The Xbox version also got GameSpy's Game of the Year and Best Action Game. And won Xbox Magazine's Game of the Year and Co-op Game of the Year. So many awards. Won a bunch of awards. People love this game. It takes about 11 to 12 hours to complete. And it got an 89 out of 100 on Metacritic for the Xbox version, an 85 for the Xbox 360 version, an 84 on the PS2, an 80 on PC, 78 on PS3, 64 on GameCube, and 61 on Wii.
Yikes. Wow. Sorry, Nintendo Wii. Ooh.
Yep. So the story, and this one actually has a story that's easier to follow too. So in Double Agent, Sam Fisher must infiltrate a terrorist organization from the inside. It's called John Brown's Army, and they want to do some real bad stuff. Sam goes to prison undercover, and he helps some of the top people from the John Brown's Army escape prison. That's his in, right? So from there, he joins the group and he starts getting closer to them to try to take them down from the inside. So the fun part here, though, is that there are a few moments in the game, not a whole lot of them, but there are a few moments where Sam can make a choice to be a good guy and lose standing with the JBA, or be a bad guy and gain standing with the JBA but lose standing with the NSA. Because there'll be parts where the bad guys will be like, we need you to kill this guy. And like, obviously, as a good person, you don't want to just kill good people, right? But maybe you want to because you need these guys to trust you, right? Like, and so that kind of affects the ending. There's a few different endings, which is kind of neat. It doesn't change a whole lot of the gameplay itself. It's really just kind of points for one ending or another. That was kind of the central gimmick of this game. That's why they call it Double Agent, because you're kind of playing both sides. And that was like what was supposed to make it better and different from the other games. Otherwise, the story is pretty standard Tom Clancy stuff. I still don't know exactly what's happening, but that's also because, and this is the big thing about Double Agent, the next gen version and the previous gen version are almost completely different in the storyline. I mentioned that earlier, but it's the storyline that really is quite different. They sort of come to the same conclusion, but along the way, the levels and gameplay is like totally different.
So strange.
Yeah. So the next gen version, I'll just call it the 360 version, has a little more openness to the levels, and the storyline, while being very similar, plays out very differently. It's kind of like the overall storyline of the game was like decided ahead of time, and then the different Ubisoft teams just like sort of went and made their own game based on like an outline of a story, instead of here's what happens, like the play-by-play of the story now, or here's the 360 version, just scale it back for older. They just made them at the same time based on like the same outline. I don't know if that's actually how it happened. That's just what it feels like, because they sort of both come to the same conclusion and sort of hit some of the same plot points, but how they get there is different. Like, which is kind of fun. It makes it worth playing both versions. But the question here is, which version is the better version? And if you go into the Xbox store to buy this game to download, you're actually greeted with two versions. You can buy the OG Xbox version, and you can buy the 360 version. Why would they offer the old version when the 360 version is clearly the superior one, right? Well, general consensus is that the OG Xbox version is the superior version of the game. It feels much more like an iteration and extension of Chaos Theory, like a proper Splinter Cell 4, whereas the 360 version's kind of semi-openness doesn't really land as well, I think. I haven't put a lot of time into the 360 version, but I did play the OG version entirely, and I think it's actually probably a better game than Chaos Theory overall. The 360 version, what I've played, is still fun, worth playing. But I think it's so interesting to me that the game meant for the older consoles is widely considered to be the best version of the game. Like, you'd think the next gen version would just be so much better because it has better graphics and sound, but it's just not. Like, and it's weird because the 360 version, like the lip syncing on the faces when people are talking is like they look like Muppets. But on the original Xbox version, it's like better. I mean, it's still not great.
Does this
but it's
mean
like better.
There is a huge difference between Ubisoft Montreal and is it Ubisoft Shanghai?
Shanghai and Milan. Yeah.
That's what I think that's what that means. Is this like,
yeah,
or they just weren't communicating with each other. I mean, Ubisoft Montreal already had the benefit of, we've made two other Splinter Cell games at this point with 1 and 3.
Yeah.
And they knew what they're doing. And then Shanghai and Milan just were kind of given the storyline and said, go for it.
Yeah, and I think they took more risks too, right? Like they made the game a little bit more open. I think they made some of the choices a little bit more in terms of the story. Like I wish I had done a playthrough of the 360 version so I could have a real comparison. But they took some risks that I think didn't pay off. And Ubisoft Montreal just said, well, we'll just make Splinter Cell 4 then. We'll take what we did in Chaos Theory and we'll just do it again with this new story. And the risks just didn't pan out. Shanghai and Milan, they just didn't work out. I think it's unfair to say like, Shanghai and Milan are worse than Montreal.
No, I don't think
Montreal
worse.
played it safe. Yeah,
I do think that this is one of those moments where I wish I could bang on my desk without completely screwing up my microphone, saying open worlds don't always make games better, which I think is still a problem that we have now in 2020.
I fully agree with that. Yeah. They played it conservatively and they turned out to be the better game because of it in Montreal, but that's fine. So co-op is back in Double Agent. The first mission of both missions, of both games, the first like single player mission kind of introduces some of the co-op stuff because you go in with a partner and you have to like help each other climb up stuff and you're doing stuff together and then they just kill your partner like at the end of that.
Oh man.
It's a different partner. So the guy is different between the 360 version and the original Xbox version. He's like a different guy with a different name. And they kill him off both times, I think. And then Sam finds out that his daughter was killed in a drunk driving accident. It's all very dramatic. And that's what he gets taken out of the game. He's like, turn in your badge and gun. You're a loose cannon, Sam. Okay, we'll bring you back for one more job, but you got to go to prison for it.
Man, so the co-op campaign is before the main story campaign, like chronologically?
It takes place at the same time. Sorry, I got sidetracked when I started talking about co-op, and then I said in the single player version, I started describing the first level.
So in the middle of the single player version, it like cuts. Yeah. Sam's gone for a while, and then that's when the co-op missions take place, and then he jumps back into this. If you play single player, it seems seamless, but really there's like a time break.
Yeah, I think if you play single player, they just introduce the concept of the co-op stuff because you go in with someone else.
Okay. I'm getting confused.
And then I this is my fault because then I got sidetracked by like, then they kill him, and then Sam finds out his daughter died, and like this is all still part of the single player campaign. But anyway, by the end of the first level, you sort of know how the co-op works, which I think is kind of an interesting way of explaining it. So the co-op missions are separate; they're separate game mode, but the storyline takes place in parallel to the main storyline.
So you're not even playing as Sam.
You're not playing as Sam, right? You're playing as two different Splinter Cells. They help along the storyline. So like the first mission in the single player game is like you go to this like nuclear reactor or something in Iceland and you find some stuff out and then you leave. And that's when all the bad stuff happens to Sam. But there's the stuff that you find out there, like there's like bombs or something, and they need to be defused by the two co-op guys. So they go in. The two co-op guys are the ones that orchestrate the prison riot that lets Sam bust his the bad guys out of jail so that he can.
That's kind of cool. So it's like a spy team.
Yeah.
Is one of those co-op agents named John Glames?
I wish.
Oh, that would be amazing. That's how they could tie him back in. You know?
Yeah.
That would be amazing. I bet you John Glames. There's probably no trademark on this. You know what I mean? No one cares.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Oh man, just do a little nod to the Glames, man. Okay, everyone wants it.
So yeah, we should play those co-op.
I would love that. Missions. I would love to do that. And it sounds like you can play it. This one easier. Well, you're going to talk about that at the end, I'm sure. But what's easier to play on?
Yeah, I think so. So Spies versus Mercs is back, but it's called Spies versus Upsilon this time. I guess the bad guys. I don't know. I haven't played the multiplayer for this one. I don't think too much has changed here. They added some new maps, things like that. I think by this point in gaming history, multiplayer was a little bit of they were still like sort of shoehorning multiplayer modes into games that didn't really need them. And we're coming into this era of like long-term multiplayer games, like Gears of War had just come out. And then before that, or then later on, Halo 3 and Call of Duty 4 would come out, where it's like these games are really focused on multiplayer. So lots of games at this point in time still had like this tacked on multiplayer experience that they didn't need to have. But going into the future, we'll start to see games that sort of focus on either single player or multiplayer. That's the set context of like where we are in video game history. So like the multiplayer is just fine, I guess. That's Splinter Cell, though. That's the first 4 games, all the way up through Double Agent. They are nearly synonymous with the Xbox. In fact, one of the most important titles for the original Xbox, I think. That green aesthetic that those early Splinter Cell games just made it feel so right for the Xbox, you know. And the Xbox version was always the superior console version. If you're playing this game on a console, you wanted to be playing it on Xbox. Also, any OG Xbox enthusiast owns a copy of this game, not just for the game because it's a great game and it's synonymous with the Xbox, but also because it's one of the few games that can be used to easily soft mod an original Xbox by using a hacked save file. And Splinter Cell is one of the best ones because for the other 2 games that you can use to soft mod, maybe there's more than that. There's like Mech Assault and James Bond, Agent Under Fire. You have to get like the non-platinum hits versions of those games because when they reprinted those games, they like fixed the bug. But for Splinter Cell, you can use any version of the game. It doesn't matter if it's platinum hits or not. They all work as far as I know.
That's cool.
Yeah. So any like original Xbox tinkerer has this game just for that reason alone. There's still 2 more Splinter Cell games in the series, Conviction and Blacklist, but I think they're still too new for the podcast. Plus, we are getting really long here, so we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, we're going for it today. We got some more stuff to talk about, too. This is great.
I know. So what you been playing, Mike?
So this week, I have been playing Apex Legends. Okay, been playing that always with my friends at night. But also, I started to play World of Warcraft Shadowlands with you.
Yeah, dude.
And I have to say, I am really enjoying it. Even questing by myself right now, just to kind of get to the level, because you're a bit ahead of me, is really fun. And it's kind of a fun thing to do and like turn on a podcast. And then I like pause the podcast while I watch the cutscene, and then just because it really is like farming spider butts most of the time. But I like it.
There's been a surprising lack of, not total lack of, but like less amounts of spider butt farming in this one.
Yeah, and we've actually, like, the dungeons have been really where it's at. Like, the most recent dungeon we played where there was that, like, Lost Woods puzzle was super fun.
Yeah,
and that was cool. Now, the second dungeon made me want to take my computer and throw it out the window. But
the poison stuff?
Yeah, but the most recent one was really fun. And the one before that was really fun, too. So I'm really playing it because Tyler's playing it. But if you guys want to know, because I'm sure we're going to get questions, we are Alliance is the side we're on, and we're on the Sargeras server.
Yes.
Which I learned from a lore video is the big bad guy. Sargeras. It's one of the big bads.
He's the one that stabs the planet with a sword, doesn't he?
It's really messed up.
Yeah.
It's really rude.
Yeah.
But I've been playing that. I've also been playing not as much Dark Souls this week. I kind of took a pass to it because I have been playing, I just bought it today, but I have been playing the Zelda Link's Awakening remake on
so good.
Yes, and I'm having so much fun and having so much nostalgia. I have not been playing Witcher 3, which I will explain more about when we get to our email section today. What have you been playing?
Really, most of my gaming time has been Shadowlands. We're trying to kind of barrel through the storyline, which I have not been paying attention to. And
I love that you don't pay attention to it, and then our friend gets so mad at you for not paying attention to it.
Yeah, he's like really into it, and I just can't. I've sort of like, I didn't pay attention in the beginning, and so I wasn't about to start paying attention. I was like, I'll just watch like a 10-minute YouTube video and I'll get caught up on it. Maybe next time, if I play this storyline again, maybe I'll pay more attention. But so we're just trying to barrel through that. I'm level 59 now, although I might hit 60 tonight if we play for a little bit. And then finishing up the storyline, and then we'll be doing like some mythic dungeons, I hope to do with some friends.
I still don't know what that means, raiding. But I'm into it.
It's just harder versions of the dungeons we've already played, but you'll get good gear drops from them to prepare us for raiding.
Nice.
Which is going to be fun. I think the raid comes out in a couple of weeks. So
what's crazy is we're in like a guild with people that we don't really know, and they are so on top of it. Like they are crushing it. That they get those like mythic dungeon achievements popping all the time. And I'm like, dang, these guys are so good. And then I'm sitting here just trying to get some spider butts, trying to level up my guy. But I would say that the first, like, it's kind of weird because each zone has like a subplot to the story. And there are definitely some that I enjoy more than others. Like the one in the Ardenweald that I just did, like the Gloomy Rivendell, has been really good. And I like that. And now I'm in Vampire Town, which will be fun. So I'm excited.
Vampire Town.
Welcome to Vampire Town.
That's it though. That's really all I've been playing. Because I've dumped more hours into that game this week than I've dumped into a game in a single week in a long time.
Yeah.
So that's it.
It's been good, though. Well, we got 3 emails to read, and I'll start us off with Corey's email, okay?
Okay.
All right. Great episode this week. Continue the Zelda franchise. I was never that big into Wind Waker. Hated the sailing mechanic, so I never had the motivation to go and play the DS ones. Skyward Sword, on the other hand, is one of my favorite Zelda games, if not my favorite one. The Silent Realm gameplay was really tedious, and I always hated doing those parts, but all the other parts of the game are amazing. The boss fights, temples, and just world design is A+. I would highly recommend playing it if you have the chance. Definitely one of the better Zelda games in my opinion. Also, fun fact, the main theme for Skyward Sword is Zelda's Lullaby backwards. Whoa, that's a really good fun fact.
I didn't know that.
Totally unrelated, but I wanted to know if you guys have a personal game of the year pick. I picked up Hades a couple days ago, and I'm totally in love with it, and that's easily my game of the year. If you like roguelikes and Greek mythology, you certainly can't go wrong. I hope you guys had a happy Thanksgiving. Cheers. Corey from New Hampshire. Thank you, Corey. I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving too. funny story about your Game of the Year pick is I looked at my Trello board of all the games I've completed this year, and I've only played like 2 games that came out in 2020. So I think we're going to share our Trellos, right? That's something we should definitely do.
We should share them.
Tyler and I both keep track of what games we've played and what we're playing and what we've beaten, and I think we'll share those Trello boards on the Discord probably. Just make a channel, and we'll just pin them there so people can look at them and stuff. But the 2 games I have played that have come out in 2020, I'm not counting Super Mario 3D All-Stars because that's just a remake of 3 other games, have been... actually, there's 3 games. There's Animal Crossing, there's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, and then there's Doom Eternal. And out of those 3, I would say Doom Eternal I had so much fun with. And I am a big Doom person now, thanks to Tyler, and I love it so much. And it was so much fun. I plowed through that game super quick.
Yeah, I still need to finish it.
I got all the collectibles. Oh, it was so fun. And then I abruptly stopped playing it right as they started updating and adding stuff to it. It was great. But that would be mine. Do you have a pick for the Game of the Year?
Yeah, I think my pick is, I really love Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, but I think my pick for Game of the Year is the Final Fantasy VII Remake on PlayStation 4. I loved it. I played it pretty much straight through. I had a great time with it, and I'm excited for the next part of it. I think that's got to be my Game of the Year.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, we still have time technically, don't we? We have a month, and there are new games coming out. Right. That's true. So, but we could definitely talk about it maybe in January and see if our opinions have changed. But that's a great question, Corey. We don't really talk about recent video games short of the what you've been playing. Also, I've really wanted to play Hades. I've heard it's very good.
Me too. I keep hearing nothing but good things about that.
I might need to. That's on sale for the next like 3 days on Switch, and I might just buy that now. So I have it for later. But
yeah,
do you want to read Mark's email?
Sure. Mark says, "Hi, Mike and Tyler. I was listening to your episode about FPSs, first-person shooters. Where you talk about how Doom 2016 isn't an exact remake, but captures the feel of the original while retelling the story its own way. What older game would you like to see get the same treatment in a new remake? My candidate would be Crystalis from the NES. Stay safe and happy Thanksgiving, Mark."
Oh, that's a
good question.
A really good question. I mean, I've talked about them before, and it turns out it's not necessarily a remake or a remastered version. And this is probably all nostalgia talking, loved the Nintendo 64 version of Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, which was pod racing. And I think that would be really cool if they came out with a Star Wars racing game like that. And I think people would play it too, because that was a fun game.
Yeah.
But other ones, I mean, do you have any? I'm thinking of others which are in my head. Do you have any other ones?
Yeah, I probably have to go with actually, I would love to see an Ocarina of Time remake, not because I think the original is bad, but I think an updated version of it telling generally the same story, but not in the exact same way would be really fun. Give us all new dungeons, give us a huge Hyrule field to go through. Oh man, if they did the next game, if you took Ocarina of Time and made it in Breath of the Wild style, but still had traditional dungeons and then just telling that story again, I think would be so much fun. Imagine having 2 versions of that gigantic world to go through, the young Link version, the old Link version. Oh man, that's probably what I would say. Otherwise, I'd say maybe the first Metal Gear Solid, maybe even the first 3 Metal Gear Solid games. Give us new gameplay, maybe tell the story a little bit differently. It could be fun.
Okay, I actually have 2 more that I just remembered. I had 3 and I finally remembered them. So, other one. Totally, this is me. You know what? You said it's ours, and I'm going with it. Mine is Snowboard Kids for N64. Yeah. I want a modern Snowboard Kids. The second one, and people have talked about it a lot, and you could say they kind of made it for the 360, but I don't think it was very great, is I was a huge fan of Perfect Dark for the Nintendo 64. And it would be cool to have a first-person shooter like that where you use gadgets and you are Joanna Dark, but I don't want to say done better because I haven't played the remake. I just didn't do it because I've heard disappointing things. I didn't want to ruin my childhood. But really, it would have to be even a Bond-style game that was like GoldenEye, but with modern graphics that actually they put some time into the story and they made it really great. I would be very much into. So
yeah, that remake that they did on 360 was basically a port with instead of N64 graphics, it was Dreamcast level graphics, but it was the levels were all the same. It was everything about it was the same. So I mean, it's probably the best way to play that game if you want to revisit it.
Yeah. Well, didn't they come out with Perfect Dark Zero? That might be the one I'm talking about.
That one was not great.
Okay, because I never played that because I didn't want to ruin it.
Yeah.
My childhood. I never played the remake.
Yeah, it was
either.
okay.
So okay. Well, they need to make a Perfect Dark game that's good.
Yeah,
that's what I want.
A new Perfect Dark would be awesome.
Great question, though, Mark. That's a really good question. So the last email I will read because this is from Mike in Philly, and he's got a bone to pick with me. Okay, so here we go. Hey guys, just caught up with the entire series tonight. Great stuff. Makes work feel lighter and less lonely as I work from home. That's great to hear. You guys hadn't mentioned The Witcher 3, but once in the entirety of the podcast, up until a couple months back where Mike started playing it. I was looking forward to progress updates in his What You've Been Playing section. Then it's as if he never even heard the name Yennefer of Vengerberg. I was kind of sad. It seemed he had moved on so quickly, but then 2 episodes back, Mike tried again, this time really committing to playing the game. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, mission accomplished. Last week, he starts playing Dark Souls or whatever. What's the dealio, Mike? Okay, so there's more to this email, but I'm going to take a break right here. The dealio is that The Witcher 3 seems so daunting. Like, there are games that I have started playing and stopped playing because they seem so big that I'm not going to play any other video game for the next 3 months. And Witcher 3 is definitely one of those. Not saying it's bad and not saying I will never play it, but I definitely have to be in a mood to dive into a game like The Witcher 3. And I thought that mood would have struck 2 weeks ago, and it kind of did. And I had a lot of fun playing. And then holidays happened. Me not being home a lot happened, and then WoW came out, and it's just been, I haven't been able to commit. So I'm kind of like picking games right now that are a little less daunting. Like the new Zelda, like I'll play it for like an hour at a time, and then I'll beat it in like 2 weeks, you know? Versus The Witcher 3 is going to be 100 hours of my life. And I feel like if I need to keep up with the story, I need to play it like every single day. So that's why we're on a break right now. That's why Yennefer and I are on a break right now. So, okay. Mike keeps going. I only recently started gaming again this year after a 12-year hiatus. The first game I picked up was The Witcher 3, and it's become extremely dear to me. I was just wondering why you guys haven't really talked about it, and why is Mike flip-flopping? This is the greatest game I've ever played. Granted, I've missed out on the last 12 years. I don't really know what my point is, but I love this game, and I'm a little surprised it hasn't come up more. Really, I'm just messing with you, but it does lead up to a topic I'd like to expand on. Can you talk about your gaming habits? This is really good. I don't want to play more than a couple games at a time, really giving them my all. And when they're as long as The Witcher, I'm afraid I'm only going to scratch the surface of all the important and fun games before I die. I'm 34 and panicking. I also make movies and music. So I only have a few hours at night to play, and there's so much I want to explore. Now, Cyberpunk is about to be out, and I'm going to play that, but I'm not quite finished with The Witcher, and I started Black Mesa as per your recommendation. Is this how piles of shame happen? Do you guys just put in way more hours than me? Please elaborate on this. Keep up the good work, Mike in Philly. So I was like Mike in Philly. I think I used to play games where I would pick one, and that's my life for the next month. And I have slowly changed as I've grown older. I'm 32, and I now play games based on what I feel like playing at the time. I don't force myself to beat a game anymore. A prime example of this was Borderlands 3. I was playing it with friends. It was fun. My friends all beat it because they got way ahead of me. And then I just kind of wasn't having fun anymore. So I stopped. Does that mean I'm never going back to it again? No, I'll probably go back to it at some point. But I just need to play what I feel, if that makes sense. What about you, Tyler?
So my gaming habits are I have a few hours each night to play. Lots of times I'm playing. I have a few games that are ongoing games. Like right now we're playing a lot of World of Warcraft. I'm playing it with you. For a while it was Destiny. For many nights it's League of Legends too. I've played a lot of that. But I've had this existential panic before too of I'm missing out on games where it's if I focus too much on a game, then I'm missing these other games that are going by. But if I jump between games all the time, I never really finish anything. And am I really truly getting anything out of playing just a little bit of each game. And there was a period of time where I was like, no, I have to finish things. I need to like check the box. And the Trello board doesn't help with that because I'm like addicted to moving games to the done section.
It feels so good when we move Halo all the way over.
It really does.
Oh.
Yeah, it really does feel good. But I've also started to take a little bit of a step back and like, here's the deal. You're never going to be able to play all of the important and fun games before you die. There's too many. It's like watching all the movies, right? Or worse, watching all the TV shows or reading all the books, right? You just can't do it. There isn't enough time in the day. And even if there was enough time, I wouldn't want to spend it all playing every single game ever, right? So I'm doing what Mike does and I follow my heart. You know, what feels fun to play right now, play that, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? You're trying to have fun. And if what you're playing feels like work, why are you playing it? Just stop. You don't have to do that. So that's how I feel about that. And like, so sometimes I have a pile of shame. My on hold section on my Trello board is starting to feel a little bit like a pile of shame. And the backlog section, I have an on hold section for like backlog games that I've started, but then put away for whatever reason. And sometimes it helps to look at that and be like, oh, I haven't played that game in a while. I'm just going to pull it back out of here and try it again. And have, maybe it's fun now. But yeah, I'm playing what's fun right now. Shadowlands is what's fun, and I'm excited to do more there. And one day Shadowlands will stop being fun, and you know what? I will stop playing it then.
The best part about Shadowlands is I've given myself, I bought the 3-month subscription, and in those 3 months, I'm done. When that 3 months is up, I'm going to be done with Shadowlands probably. I've just kind of told myself I'll play the raid a couple times maybe, get done with it, feel good, and then I'll be able to move on. But I totally agree with you, Tyler, about missing games. There's just no way you can play everything and beat everything. So you might as well play the games that you think are fun and what you feel, Yep. And then if you don't beat them, it's fine, but you still experience them and what's important. I think beating a game, it's a thing you can be proud of among your friends, but it's not really, it doesn't really matter, it's right. It's not, you still, I've played The Witcher 3. Did I beat The Witcher 3? No. I know that's a big plot thing, I think, in the middle of it that I need to see, and I will get there. It's just going to take me a lot of time because I do have other things in my life, in my games, and other things that are non-gaming related. Like Mike mentioned, movies and music, that's fine, So it's just, you got to find that balance. It's all about that balance. But you'll all get to see our shame piles soon. We'll put them on the Discord.
When we share our Trello boards.
Yeah, we'll share them. Although I don't think my shame pile is as big as yours, but there are some games that if you say, hey, Mike, you have this game on there, I'd just be like, yeah, I'm never going to get back to that one. For example, there's now 2 Pokemon games that I have not beaten the Elite Four on that I've just left. And I feel shameful, but I also don't want to grind 10 levels on each of those Pokemon. I just don't feel it. I just don't want to. So,
yeah,
especially with Pokemon games, it's like I'm not a kid in my parents' Suburban anymore that can just play these games for 5 hours on a road trip and then beat the Elite Four. I just can't. I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
So, but this was an amazing email, Mike. I want to thank you for this email and for accusing me of flip-flopping, because I 100% am flip-flopping. That's what's happening.
It's not about not flip-flopping. It's about accepting the flip-flop.
Yeah, you must
just knowing what it is.
Yeah, accept the flip-flop. Let's get t-shirts made. Okay. But if you want to email us, you can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to us everywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you can't do it where you listen to us, just tell your friends about us. It's great. We got 2 new ratings on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much to whoever left those. You can also go to our Discord. If you want to join the Discord, you can either email us and I can send you a link, or you can go to my Twitter profile. That's MECOLETTA on Twitter. Click the pinned tweet at the top. That's an invite, and then you're in. And don't forget to check the box in the rules section. That's how you become a full member. There's some people that have joined the Discord but never actually clicked the box, so they can't see anything. It's just agreeing to the rules makes it so you can go post and stuff on there. So do that if you want to. Tyler's at Sneaker Elf, ELPH. That's right. Don't forget about Tyler.
Yeah, I don't really tweet a lot.
Yeah, I haven't been tweeting a lot either. It's just been it's been the holidays. Things have been busy, so there's a lot of games to play. With that though, I think that pretty much covers it. Do you want to say bye to everybody before we go? This is a long episode today.
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody.